organization that people haven't self-deselected. They had to fire. And this is a story actually and I've had this story on my list since, when was the date of this? Since November last year. And then something came up in the last couple of weeks with, well, it's Stripe. Okay, I don't know why I'm holding off the punchline. It's Stripe, right? So we're looking at Stripe. In November 2022, Stripe cuts 14% of its workforce. And when this happened, the way the CEO did this, I felt this was such an incredible leadership lesson, but it didn't fit with any of our stories and then with any of our themes, and then it kind of got a little bit late and everything like that. But then recently, Stripe have just laid off another 40 people going back in the last week or two, right? And what I want to do is, I think one of the tough things as a leader is to fire people. And I think in both of these instances, I think that what I believe is their approach has been really good. And I think that we can learn a lot from the way that they approach this firing, because it's never nice to actually fire someone, but sometimes you do have to make that tough decision as a boss. And I feel like, and now the Stripe CEO was actually praised, widely for the way that he approaches. Now, why? Because normally when CEOs of big tech companies that are making billions of dollars and stuff like that, when they start firing people, they get bad press, let's say. But let me actually read. What happened is when Stripe they announced these firings or the cuts. I don't know whether they laid them off or whether they fired them or made them redundant. I don't exactly know. However, he released this public notice, and actually all the links to everything that we refer to is all down in the description. So go and check that out. But one of the part of the thing, part of that note that he wrote was, "We overhired for the world we're in, and it pains us to be unable to deliver the experience that we hoped that those impacted would have at Stripe." So he just said, you know what, we overhired, because what happened is, during the pandemic, Stripe obviously does online payments, and obviously e-commerce exploded during COVID. And so they did a massive hiring run, and so he said, look, we overhired. We overhired for the world that we're in, and we cop it. But what was really good is they actually took responsibility. And I think this is the key, right? That you don't normally see this with big organizations. When they fire people, they're like, oh, it's just the environment, the market has dropped. Like, they're pointing at other things. But the CEO here, even though he's already said, we overhired for the world we're in. It's like, we overhired. It was our fault, right? But this is a direct quote from his note. In making these changes, you might reasonably wonder whether Stripe's leadership made some errors of judgment. We'd go further than that. In our view, we made two very consequential mistakes, and we want to highlight them here since they're important. The fact that they're going, look, we made mistakes, and here we're gonna share what our mistakes were. Being open, authentic, and vulnerable, I think, is really important as a leader. We were much too optimistic about the internet economy near-term growth, in 2022 and 2023 and underestimated both the likelihood and impact of a broader slowdown. We grew operating costs too quickly, buoyed by the success we're seeing in some of our new product areas. We allowed coordination costs to grow and operational inefficiencies to seep in. They had to fire 14% of their workforce. But instead of blaming other people, they took responsibility. They said, you know what, this is our fault. And while I think it's actually not that, it's never nice to fire someone, even when they're not performing. It's even worse to fire someone when, well, they're performing, but the market, the business just isn't there. So we just got to let them go. We like them, they're doing a good job, everything, but we just don't have the work for them. But for them to be able to go, you know what, you're fired, right? You're let go, but it's our fault. I think it just takes the edge off the firing for the employee or now former employee. What's your take on that, Dr. Roy?
Look, I think the way it was handled was really excellent because it's not the employee's fault, so to speak, which that actually helps with the termination of their work. And I think more than likely what John Collison said was true. They did make a mistake. They thought the market was going to grow faster than it did, partly because the rate of growth of that market slowed down anyway. But then you've got the general malaise in the economy overall to contend with as well. So they got their forecast wrong, essentially. They were overly optimistic. I think it's good to say that. And let's face it, if you're going to receive the accolades and accept the accolades for the times when you get all your forecasts right, you should also be accepting responsibility when you get it wrong. I think the other thing too is it is important as an organisation to fire people when you have to.
Yeah, that's good.
And look, we find this really tough as Christians. And I've said this before on our podcast, and it is a little bit controversial. God is our provider, not the managing director, not the owner of a business. God is our provider. If a business has a mission, the focus has to be on the mission. And if hanging on to too many employees is going to compromise the mission, then you shouldn't compromise the mission. Now, I know that's a really difficult thing for Christians to receive, but I really do believe that, because if it's a God-given mission, if your business has accepted a God-given assignment to create some positive contribution to human flourishing, that's what you need to focus on. It's God's responsibility, in a sense, to look after the people. Now, this doesn't mean we should treat people as if they're cannon fodder. You know, we should undertake a good process for selecting people to make sure we're getting square pegs for square holes, so to speak. I would actually see that as an expression of neighbour love, because it's not a good thing to employ the wrong person because they're not going to be happy, and nor are you. But I think also when we're making people redundant, to the extent that the business can without undermining its mission, it needs to help people make the transition from being employed to being unemployed. Now, that may cost money. You may be in a position where you can support people financially beyond what is required by the law. In the United States, there's most employment contracts are what they call at will, which essentially means that you've got work today if the boss decides, and the boss has got you on his payroll or her payroll if you decide. So there's not really much legal compulsion to financially help somebody out. But I actually think if you're a Christian in business, you need to consider very carefully to the extent to which you can help somebody make the transition. Some financial provision is part of it, but if you're able to let them come in and use the office if they want to to make phone calls, to type resumes, etc., etc. Do everything you possibly can to help people make the transition to another position. There are consultancies that will help people with that transition. Employ the consultancy to help your people make the transition. Now, look, not everybody will want to do that because people deal with the tragedy of losing their job in different ways. The other thing you need to bear in mind too is it's going to have an impact on the morale of the people who are left behind. They often feel a sense of loss, so you need to work on staff morale as well. And I think being an authentic leader, which I think is evidenced in the way in which that statement was made back in November last year, I think that's really important. And look, communicate these principles to your staff. So if you're a Christian leading a business and you have the same understanding that I do, you make it clear to everybody that I really do believe that God is the one who provides for every single one of us. And that God has given this business a mission. This business is on assignment, an assignment which has been given to it by God. And that's what we have to be true to. But as I said, there are better and worse ways of actually dealing with that separation from the workplace.
And I want to kind of finish this off with a statement that was made by a spokesperson for Stripe about these most recent firings. And the statement just said, these changes are never easy, and we had to say goodbye to about 40 very talented employees. And I said, like, in areas like recruiting, but like, I just thought it was beautiful that they're still being encouraging and being supportive and still showing love and you know, to those people. It's not like going, oh, well, stuff them, they're gone, you know, like, you know, they were dead weight, we get rid of them. No, they actually said that, like, we have to say goodbye, right? Which is expressing that it's sad, but you're expressing that they're very talented. Like, it's a pity that we have to get rid of these talented people. Whereas a lot of people, when they go through their firing process, they kind of start getting a little nasty and like, oh, they're dead weight and we don't need them. Then we start looking for bad things they did and everything like that. Like, what if we could find a way to love people on the way out? You know, like that's really what will set us apart as Christian leaders. If someone's leaving your team, no matter what's happened, how can you love them on the way out? How can you still show them love and appreciation as they're exiting? I think that this is kind of like to sum up really the theory behind this story with Stripe is sometimes we have to fire people, but let's take our responsibility and make sure we love people on the way out as well. And that's how we can set ourselves apart as good leaders. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.